So we have been fortunate in that as the people who are growing the plants, we've gotten the bulk of the publicity on this project. It seems like everybody's been super excited about it, but we're actually latecomers to the project. We only started working on the project a couple years ago, and Jason came to me and said, you know, we have this project, we have 70,000 plants, can you do it? And I said, well, I don't know, we've never done that before. So I hope to tell you about how we worked through that process today, and we feel very fortunate to be working on this project. So make sure I do this right. So most of you know us because of our policy and advocacy work and our attempts to carry on the legacy of our founders by fighting pollution and inappropriate fill around the bay, plastic bags, and recently the work on Measure AA. But we also have this other work that we've been doing for about the last 20 years to do community-based habitat restoration. And we do that work around the edge of the shoreline. We bring about 5,000 people out to the edge of the shore every year and at about 6 sites around the bay, and we usually put in 35,000 plants. So having Jason come to us and say, we want you to put in 70,000 plants was, you know, kind of stretched our brain a little bit. So that was our contract, was to collect seeds for 70,000 plants, propagate them, and get them into the ground in a cost-efficient manner. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what the costs of that in a traditional manner and that Save the Bay doesn't do. But for us, it required us to really think outside the box. Like, we have these 2 small nurseries at the edge of the shoreline, one in Palo Alto and one in Martin Luther King, but how can we expand those? There's no way we can put 70,000 more plants into those areas. And so working with Peter, we actually developed a method to create raised beds on site, similar if you've done any gardening at your house where you create raised beds to grow vegetables. We built a bunch of those on the project site and then thought about how we could recruit volunteers to help us. And in addition to those 70,000 plants, there was this minor issue of about 4 million seeds that also needed to be collected and spread on the site. So, and oh yeah, could you do that in a year? So if you've done any of this work, you know that it typically takes about 2 years to collect seeds, grow plants in a traditional nursery, and then get them outplanted. So doing this, we had a tight timeline. We came in in the summer of 2014. With the deadline of November 2015 to get those plants grown and in the ground, and while we still maintain our existing sites and our existing work, including a new site at Eden Landing. So this is how we typically do it. We collect some seeds, we put them in flats, and then we throw those into containers, and we use volunteers to do almost all that work, including our staff. So 70,000 plants. If you were to, each of those plants, if you were to go to a commercial nursery or a native plant nursery and ask to fill the order for this project, would run between $2 and $6 a container. So for this project, I ran the numbers for the various plant species, and it would actually be about $250,000 to supply the plants for this project. And I'll talk to you more about those total costs at the very end. So then the other thing was, where are we going to grow these? As I said, we don't have very much space in our nurseries. And so talking with Jason, who's been a tremendous project partner, he said, well, just grow them. We could grow them on site. That would reduce a lot of costs in a lot of ways. And so we walked out to this gravel area at the treatment plant, and so they said, well, what about here? So I don't know, those of you who grow plants, it's just not intuitive, you know, right? You're going to go out to a gravel lot and grow plants. But we did. We created 17 raised beds at the site, filled them with dirt and soil, and went out and collected a bunch of plant species and started installing them in the ground. And what we ended up with in the bottom right-hand corner is sort of sets of meadows of these plants, similar to what you might find in nature. So rather than growing containers and individual plants, we actually grew meadows of plants. And then when we went to harvest those plants for the project, you could actually go out and pull up like single divisions of that plant. So when we put them into the beds, one division would actually multiply itself many times over. And so that's one of the economies of scale for us, was that we didn't have to have those individual container plants. We could actually create meadows of plants and then just go and pull from those. And those are much simpler to put in the ground as well. So you don't have to dig a hole, get the container, plant the plant. You can just stuff this little root or a piece of plant into the ground. So it made it a lot more efficient that way too. I also want to bring in how we used volunteers to the project. I feel like the use of volunteers, we used a number of volunteers, like 200 or 250, but I think the real benefit for us was our ability to talk about the project, for not only for our benefit, but for the project's benefit. Because, a lot of the engineering that's going on is a little bit obtuse to people, but, we have plants that we can show people and talk about what the engineering is happening with using the plants. So, we brought out a number of folks from some of our partners. We ran 5 public programs and 5 corporate programs and had some school groups out. And it really was a great way to talk about the project. So, and then, as I mentioned, we usually put in 35,000 plants using our volunteers in a year. So that's, how are we going to fit in putting in 70,000 more plants? And we were really nervous about that. But November 14th was the first of 2015, just last fall, was the first day we worked on the project. And we had, I don't even remember the number of volunteers, but within a couple hours we were able to put in 3,200 plants on that opening day of planting. And that kind of reassured us, like, okay, this is going to be possible, because we had never done anything. In the year we're total going to put in 100,000 plants. So we were able to find, and then kind of hone in the methods on how we wanted to get the plants in the ground quickly. And so this just shows you, flagging the areas where we want different species of plants, and the volunteers came out and actually installed them. All the credit for the work that we did at the site goes to the woman on the left, Jessie Olson, our nursery manager, who just, we hired her at the time we started this project and said, can you do this? And she made it happen. So, as I've said, we started in November 2015 and we completed it just a few short months later. So it went really fast. As I said, we had 220 volunteers. We mostly used staff on the project, because we were really concerned about the quality of the work. Often when we use volunteers, communicating, high quality work is sometimes a challenge. When we use containers, we want to always emphasize that they go the right side up. That's that kind of stuff. So we were really hesitant to go full on, but the volunteers that we got were actually really quite good. And you can see that we could fill the cells in this plant. We could actually fill our plant like a half to 3/4 of a cell on a volunteer program. So it was pretty efficient that way. I don't want you to read this, but I just want you to see that the benefits of the volunteer program for us actually turned out to be the way that we could help communicate about the project. So we had a ton of media hits. After volunteers worked on the project, we often had them write blogs, or anybody that was involved with the project, we'd have them write blogs. So we feel like we were also able to help the project communicate out to the public. And not only that, but a lot of these kinds of forums where people involved in the project gave presentations both regionally and nationally. So I want to come back kind of to the punchline of how much did it cost and did we really save any money. So I mentioned to you that if you using a commercial nursery, the plants would have cost around $250,000. And then I have had to check into the cost of planting crews for some of our work and thinking about getting help for our work in the past. And, penciling out about how much this would cost, this 160 number is actually not right. I did the math wrong the other day in a hurry. It's actually $210,000 it would have cost to put this many plants in the ground using a commercial planting crew. So that brings the total actually up to $460,000 to both grow the plants and install them in the ground, and our contract costs were way less than half of that. So I think there are some things that we did on this project that could be translated. This project was super densely planted, and for the reasons that Aidan will probably talk about as far as the experiment itself goes. So we could less densely plant, use some of these similar methods, and there's other ways to scale up what we did. So I think we accomplished what we were hoping to, is to help demonstrate ways to do this more efficiently. But we're also excited to maybe try to use these methods elsewhere in the Bay. So I think that's all I have.